Let's delve into a couple of these classes and subclasses, some big changes, some medium-sized changes. A very dramatic change is the Warlock.
Yeah, let's start there, and then we can go back to our warrior friends later. Let's talk a bit about the Warlock and the other two mages who are in the same UA. So as we looked at the three mages, the Warlock, the Sorcerer, and the Wizard, we had several goals that are similar to the goals we've had for all of the classes in this playtest process. One, we wanted to make sure we address concerns that fans have expressed about the classes over the last 8 years, particularly focusing on the massive survey we did in 2021 on the Player's Handbook, where people told us directly what they thought about the options in the 2014 Player's Handbook. We also wanted to make sure that each of the classes had a satisfying level progression where you felt like you were getting core elements of the class at low level, learning how those elements work, then make a sequence of decisions that feel satisfying, leading you all the way up to 20th level. So level progression is something, and satisfying level progression is something that we've been looking at. We also look for opportunities to clarify things in every element of the game as we go through this process, fix things that might be overpowered, and also fix things that might be underpowered. And all of that flows into the mages. Now, with the mages, we also had a special goal with both the Warlock and the Sorcerer. And that was to give each class a bit more of its own identity. And that might sound like a strange thing for me to say, given that the Warlock in particular has always had such wonderful flavor and has a beloved identity. So here I'm not talking about narrative identity, I'm talking about mechanical identity. Because one of the things that was masked in the 2014 versions of the Warlock and the Sorcerer by us giving you your subclass at first level is that the subclass was basically subbing in for the class's mechanical identity. Because you were choosing a subclass immediately, whether that was Draconic Bloodline or the Fiend Patron over in the Warlock, that basically became your class, rather than you having any time just being a Warlock or just being a Sorcerer. And so as a part of that, having a more satisfying level progression and also giving the class a little more of a core mechanical identity, we wanted to give you a couple of levels as a Warlock and a Sorcerer of being a Warlock and a Sorcerer. And so as a part of that, we have rearranged some of the elements in each of the classes and also given you some brand new options. In the Warlock, Pact Boon, which used to be a third level feature, is now a first level feature, and this helps shape how your Warlock is going to play. If you choose Pact of the Blade at first level, you are now kind of venturing down a path that is going to include weapon use. In contrast, if you pick the Pact of the Tome, you're emphasizing spellcasting more. And then if you choose Pact of the Chain, you're more sort of in a hybrid space where it's about using your Pact Familiar in new and exciting ways. Now, coupled with this at first level is, and this is probably the biggest update to the Warlock, we have replaced Pact Magic with spellcasting. Here's what this means practically for the Warlock. Probably like the high level thing it means for the Warlock is you're going to have way more spell slots. One of the main points of dissatisfaction in Warlock feedback we've gotten for years is how few spell slots a Warlock gets. And then the fact that getting those spell slots back was tied to the short rest, which in many campaigns was hard to have because not every group takes short rests. Sometimes it's difficult to pull off. And that meant you had the Warlock, one of the only classes in the game, who had a key resource that they needed short rests for. And so what this now means is this Warlock, when you get to 20th level, you're going to have 15 spell slots instead of 4. that is a huge change and improvement we have found playing with the Warlock, because it now suddenly means that you, as a Warlock player, you can feel like you can actually cast your spells. Because one of the things that we have found, not only when we read the feedback, but observe Warlocks being played, is that those spell slots in the 2014 version were so few that what that often led to people doing was hoarding them and never using them. So that 4 spell slots functionally became 0 spell slots. Because if you never use the thing, you essentially don't have it. And so this is, again, a big motivation for us, getting the Warlock having a more easy to use spellcasting subsystem, so that, again, you actually feel like you can truly be a spellcaster.
Yeah, you don't have to be so precious about your spell slots, and you are on the same timetable as everyone else. Instead of having to beg your dungeon master for, hey, can I get a short rest, even though no one else needs one necessarily.
Right. Now, in terms of the spellcasting progression, people are going to see that the Warlock has been built similarly to a Paladin and a Ranger in having a spellcasting progression that goes up to 5th level. Now, under the hood, that's basically what was already going on in the Warlock. So rather than the Warlock having sort of this tricky, different spellcasting system, we've now brought the Warlock in with everybody else while maintaining the Warlock's distinctiveness. And here's how we did that. Warlocks still have their Eldritch invocations. And in fact, you now will cap out at 9 instead of 8. And one of those new invocations is Mystic Arcanum. So the Mystic Arcanum feature that Warlocks got before, which was how they got to access spells higher than 5th level, is now an Eldritch invocation that you can start taking sooner than you could before.
Nice.
And it also allows you to get lower level spells than it allowed you to get before. We made it an Eldritch invocation because we wanted you as a player to be able to decide how much you wanted to delve into the spellcasting pool versus some of the other options that are now available to the Warlock, because there are also new invocations here. Many of the invocations that are present also have gotten sort of a fresh coat of paint, new functionality. Like we've redesigned some of the lower rated invocations, like Gaze of Two Minds now allows you to actually cast spells from the space of the person whose mind you're sharing.
Pretty great.
Yeah, so the Warlock gets a ton of new functionality here. There is also, some wonderful new flavor. At 11th level, Warlocks get a new feature called Contact Patron, because we realized a big gap in the Warlock class before was they didn't have an easy or direct way to call up their patron, even though that's a major part of a lot of D&D campaigns involving Warlocks. So we're like, let's make this a part of the class.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on so many adventures, and that is inevitable so many times for many Warlocks, probably even more than a Cleric who has, like Divine Intervention and all these other abilities to, like, contact their god. Warlock, their boss may be a bit more hands-on. Right. There might be a little bit more communication happening.
Yeah.
Because there's a darker vibe.
Yeah.
So
the design update notes on the Warlock go deeper into the many things that are new here. One of the things I'll talk about before we move on maybe to the Sorcerer is Warlocks also now get the Hex spell and Eldritch Blast for free. We consider those to be core functionality for Warlocks, and we don't want you to have to spend one of your spell choices on these things that just need to be functionality for you. Because when we originally designed Hex for the Warlock, Hex was for the Warlock what Hunter's Mark is for the Ranger. And so just as in the Ranger, we now just give you Hunter's Mark in the playtest, same thing here with the Warlock giving you Hex.
I do have one question though, like with the fact that you get your pact right away at first level, but you are not specific to a patron. Like I think you described it as your baby Warlock years in some ways. Like
Right.
you are getting the attention of another entity by the way that you are gaining power.
Right. So you'd still make a pact at first level, but you don't make your big pact with your patron until third level. And in the story text, we've left it up to you to decide if that initial pact is with the same entity who becomes your patron.
Oh, this is fun.
Or is it with somebody else? Because the story of the Warlock has always been, they get magic where they can find it.
Yeah.
Because even in the 2014 version, Eldritch Invocations, for instance, are not from the Warlock's patron. And the Warlock has always had elements of its class that was not from the patron.
Right.
And so we wanted to highlight that a little more while still having pact be a thematic through line. So you're still making a pact at first level. It can still be with the entity who is eventually your patron, but we now leave it open. You might decide, well, I started dabbling with this other choice, but now at third level, when I've succeeded at gaining the attention of this patron, maybe it's the same being, but maybe it's somebody else. And maybe, I'm now seeing some fun Warlock stories, maybe those two beings are not friendly with each other.
Yes. It's kind of a goldmine of narrative play. So yeah, I'm excited. Yeah.
People also see that the Fiend Patron option, which is the subclass included here, has a number of changes, all aimed at just taking things that were already beloved and simply improving them. So the Fiend Patron is going to feel very familiar, and because it was a subclass that was very popular, and so we decided we're just going to go in and improve the things people already liked. So just two examples. One, Dark One's Blessing will now trigger when a creature perishes within 5 feet of you, even if you were not the one who dealt the killing blow.
Thank you.
Because we wanted Dark One's Blessing to be able to trigger more often.
Yeah.
And then the other change I want to highlight is we have replaced the expanded spell list feature with a new feature that we call patron spells. And now, rather than getting a list of spells that are simply added to the spells that you can choose from when just choosing your spells, you now, like a paladin with their oath, you simply get these spells and have them always prepared. And similar to what we did in the Paladin Unearthed Arcana, once per day you can also cast one of your patron spells without expending a spell slot. That is going to definitely add to a Warlock's magical toolkit.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, the Fiend has always been very much beloved.
Yes.
So it's nice seeing these little enhancements. We should jump into Sorcerers, I think?
Sorcerers. So the Sorcerer, like the Warlock, now has these initial levels of just getting to experience what it is to be a member of their class before they make their subclass choice at third level. And that has allowed us to add at first level a new feature called Innate Sorcery, which gives the Sorcerer 2 Sorcerer exclusive spells. One of them, a new cantrip called Sorceress Burst, that allows the Sorcerer to control what damage type they're sending out. And it also has an exploding die mechanic where the damage, if you roll a 6, you can then roll. And so you can have we have found in our playtesting this really fun excitement of whenever the Sorcerer casts Sorceress Burst, which represents them tapping into their innate magic and just unleashing it, that it might unleash more powerfully than even the sorcerer expected. Right. Part of this is also wanting to do good by the story text that the sorcerer had back in 2014, because the 2014 story text for the sorcerer talked about, magic roiling inside you that can sometimes burst out in unpredictable ways. But other than in the wild magic sorcerer, that didn't actually play out in the mechanics of the class. So we're now delivering that in this playtest. And the Sorcerer's Burst cantrip is one of the ways that we're doing that. Sorcerer's Burst also has a subtle other purpose. The Sorcerer is one of the classes that has a number of features, particularly in its subclasses, that really care about the damage type that you're dealing. This is true in Draconic Sorcery, for example. And so we wanted to give sorcerers more control over what damage type are they dealing with their bread and butter cantrip. And so that's one of the things that we're exploring with Sorcerer's Burst. The other spell that sorcerers get at first level is Chaos Bolt. Chaos Bolt was a spell that appeared in Xanathar's Guide to Everything and was also a sorcerer exclusive spell there. We feel that it really represents well, again, this idea that you are a person with magic just almost bursting out of you, and you now just get this spell and can use it. And it also has this sort of unpredictable quality, which I think is a lot of fun. The other thing that we have done is we've moved meta magic to second level. So you're now going to be able to use meta magic sooner than you could before. And we've made it so that you get more meta magic options than you did before. You are going to start with 3 instead of 2, and you can now change one of those each time you finish a long rest. We want sorcerers to have more flexibility with how they use this core feature of the class, their ability to shape this magic that is flowing, directly from them. So many other spellcasters are drawing magic from elsewhere. Warlocks from, eldritch powers and their patrons, wizards from the ambient magic that's present in the entire multiverse, the divine and primal spellcasters from their sources. The sorcerer, though, it comes from within. Right. And so all of these features are about really delving into that. And that became such an exciting theme for us that we kept going with it. And so you're going to see that the sorcerer has multiple new features that they didn't have before. There's a new sorceress vitality, there's arcane eruption, and there is sorcery incarnate, and one of my favorite new features in any of the playtests, up at 18th level, arcane apotheosis. And all of this is about the sorcerer embodying magic itself. And these different features manifest as spells that the sorcerer will get for free. They are exclusive to this class because they, again, are all about the sorcerer tapping into their innate magic. And by creating sorcerer exclusive spells, which we have also, now there are also some new Warlock exclusive spells and some Wizard exclusive spells, we can create spells that tap into the identity of the class itself and play around with that class's mechanics. I'll give one example here, and then people can see more when they delve in.
I was wondering why the design choice to focus on spells. Yeah.
So part of it is these are spellcasters. We wanted to give them spells that are not only all their own, but also that use their core resource, spell slots. And again, we're able to do things with these spells because they're class exclusive that we couldn't do otherwise. And here's an example of that. In Sorcery Incarnate, when you cast this spell, you immediately get a random number of sorcery points back. And while Sorcery Incarnate is active, we think of it almost as like the sorcerer's version of Rage. You can use more than one meta magic option on your spells that you cast. You have advantage on your spell attack rolls. This kind of thing where you become, magic incarnate, and for a short period of time, you can sort of alpha.
Yeah, very bursty.
Yes.
Potentially.
Yeah, which the sorcerer has often been about. And so much of what we're digging into here, just as we are with the warriors, is how can we bring out their identities even better? And we're going to be doing the same when we revisit the experts and the priests. We've gotten some great feedback in the playtests, and now that we have the weapon mastery system ready for people to try out in the broader world, and we've been digging deeper into class exclusive spells, when we then return to the experts and priests, these approaches will then inform some of what we're going to do in those classes as well.
Yeah, let's jump into the Draconic Sorcerer.
Yeah, so Draconic Sorcery has a number of quality of life improvements, as well as some brand new features. So when it comes to quality of life improvements, one of the big examples is you no longer have to spend a sorcery point to gain the resistance associated with the damage type that you've selected. We've expanded some things, like before you learned the Draconic language, we've made it now so that you can communicate with any creature that has the dragon creature type. So we've made this broader. We have then also given you a brand new feature in Draconic Exhalation. We felt it was a big missing piece that the dragon-themed sorcerer didn't exhale anything.
Right.
And this new Draconic Exhalation feature, it now plays around with Sorcerous Burst. So that Sorcerous Burst cantrip that all sorcerers get in the playtest, you can now use it to, rather than hit one person, instead exhale that energy out and potentially hit multiple people.
Nice.
Now, this new feature does replace a feature. We ended up retiring Draconic Presence because of how low rated it has been in surveys for years. And we felt, rather than having this unloved feature,
Right, yeah.
how about gives people a new exciting way to delve into this Draconic theme? Also, in playtest feedback we've gotten on the Draconic Sorcerer for years, a big ask has been, please give us more ways to use the damage type that was selected. Because you make the selection, but the 2014 version did actually very little with that selection. Now there are 3 features in the subclass that use that damage type: Elemental Affinity, Draconic Exhalation, and the revised Dragon Wings. Because Dragon Wings now, rather than being always on wings, which I know it's really cool to have always on wings, however, that was a bit overpowered, and at the same time, we wanted to also give you more ways to use your damage type.
Right.
And so how we've done that is we've made it so that while you have the Sorcery Incarnate spell active, when you go into your arcane mode, you sprout these wings, and while the spell is active, you also can flap these wings to just deal damage to people around you. So you don't have flight for as long, but when you have it, it's more powerful.
Right.
Because you aren't just flying now, you're getting these other benefits.
Nice. Perfect.
The wizard
Yes.
also,
Kind of a big deal.
yes, the wizard does not have as many new things as the sorcerer and the warlock. Part of that is the wizard is one of the most beloved classes in the game. Also, the wizard has had unparalleled flexibility that often translates into really satisfying tactical options, strategic options, because wizards can be like, what am I going to need several days from now?
Yeah.
The wizard in general was in really solid shape. So here, though, there are still some new things that really lean into the wizard as the planner and the scholar. So one, there's a new feature at second level called Academic that just makes wizards really good at their ability checks when they're just using their big brains to figure things out. There's also a new feature at first level called Wizard's Spellbook. The spellbook for wizards before was a core part of their identity, but mechanically it sort of existed in another realm where there was a little bit about the spellbook in the wizard's spellcasting feature. There was then more about the spellbook in a really long sidebar in the 2014 Player's Handbook. And you had to kind of go to these two separate places to figure out what the heck does my spellbook do and how do I use it. So what we did is we took all the spellbook related rules and combined them into a new feature called Wizard's Spellbook. This is now the feature that gives you your special form of ritual casting, since wizards are able to ritual cast easier than anybody else because they can even ritual cast a spell they don't have prepared as long as it's in that spellbook. We've also made it so that the wizard can now use the spellbook as a spellcasting focus. In art, wizards are often shown even holding their book while they're casting their spells, so we feel like, okay, they should be able to actually cast their spell with the book. We've really enjoyed just aesthetically that now being present. We've also now in that feature given you a new spell called Scribe Spell. And this is the first in a sequence of spells wizards now get that really are all about them interacting with the wizard's spellbook. So later, wizards then get another new spell that's wizard exclusive called Memorize Spell, and even the name is a nod to early days of wizard design in D&D when it was always, rather than talking about preparing spells, we talked about the memorizing spells. This is a spell that allows the wizard, if they choose to cast it, to change a spell they have prepared, again, leaning into this planning aspect. But then later, wizards get a new spell called Modify Spell, which they can cast to tweak a spell. And we give you a menu of options of ways you can change a spell, whether it's changing its damage type or some other element. A wizard can have only one of these modified spells prepared at a time, but again, it's about the wizard studying their spellbook and tweaking their magic. We are doing this also to lean more into the classic D&D wizard story of wizards being the creators of spells. There are a number of spells in the game, the Mordenkainen spells, the Big B spells, the Leomund spells, that are all about wizards creating spells. And so we felt, let's have more of that in the class itself. And so this theme culminates, appropriately enough, in a new spell called Create Spell. And what this spell allows you to do is take a spell that you've modified with Modify Spell and turn it into a new spell that is in your spellbook, and then thenceforth you are able to prepare. And so really this is a way for us to finally give in class feature form this kind of ultimate wizard fantasy of I made my own spell.
Right.
Now, the Dungeon Master's Guide will still have other guidance on how spells can be created sort of more permanently in a campaign, but this is a way for a wizard to do it on their own using their class features.
And it really shows off their ability to hack magic in a way.
Exactly. But they have to do it in a planned way.
Yeah.
This is very distinct from the sorcerer's metamagic. Sorcerers can, who basically are improvisers, they can modify their spells on the fly. And we wanted to make sure when we gave the wizard the ability to do some sort of almost scientific adjustments, that it had a very different feel and really leaned into, again, the wizard having to be a planner and having to have their book and ultimately with the goal of creating something new that will then also go into that book. Whereas again, in contrast, The sorcerer doesn't have to plan at all. It's just I cast the spell, and in the moment I'm going to decide, do I want to tweak this spell in one of the ways that my meta magic options allow me to tweak them.
That brings us to the Evoker.
The Evoker mostly has some quality of life improvements. For instance, the starting feature, Evocation Savant, now actually gives you some evocation spells because we realize one of the misses, not only in the Evoker, but people will see this in future UAs when we do other wizard subclasses, is a miss was the School of Magic focused subclasses weren't actually giving you any spells in those schools.
Right, yeah,
So
makes sense.
that is something we've addressed. We have also enhanced Potent Cantrip so that it is no longer useful only with saving throw cantrips. It now also works with attack roll cantrips.
Oh, fantastic, yeah.
So far more useful. Those are the main things there. I mean, the Evoker is amazingly solid and beloved, and so really it was just like, similar to in the Fiend Patron, how can we make some quality of life improvements and then just send it back out?
Yes, my partner is a big fan of Sculpt Spell, so being able to like drop a fireball, not here, buddy, always fun.
And speaking of Sculpt Spell, then looping back to our Sorcerer friend, every one of the Sorcerer's meta magic options has been revisited. And we have a design note devoted just to meta magic, detailing what we've done in the various meta magic options. I connected it to Sculpt Spell because listening to playtest feedback, we have altered Careful Spell
Right, yeah.
meta magic so that it's a bit more like Sculpt Spell. This is something that people have requested, and we agreed that Careful Spell could use some help. And again, you'll see notes on a number of them. Some have just gotten some quality of life changes. A few have been completely redesigned.
Right. Again, the Fiend, very iconic for the Warlock. The Draconic Sorcerer, very, most people are very pleased with it, but like those enhancements are fantastic, and the Evoker has always been fantastic as well. So nice to have those little quality of life enhancements.
Now we can go back to our warrior friends.
Yeah, so let's jump into the Warriors. I feel like just their tools alone is a giant update.
Yeah, So weapon mastery for the fighter and the barbarian are huge.
Right.
Because basically each class just got a whole new subsystem that they get to play around with. Now, we still took this opportunity, though, to give various quality of life improvements and fun improvements where we could in each class. So starting with the fighter, we've made it so that you can now use Second Wind more than once between rests, and you have the number of times you can use it increases as you go up in level. We have given you also those new features I talked about before that allow you to actually customize which mastery properties are on which of your weapons. There is a new feature at high level called Unconquerable that gives you some extra use of Indomitable while also being able to use Second Wind at the same time.
Okay.
So some really nice new features here, but again, the big ticket addition for the fighter are the Weapon Mastery, Weapon Expert, and Weapon Adept features.
Right.
3 brand new features for the fighter that give you this whole new mini game with weapons that you get to play, and that only the fighter gets to play.
I mean, I will admit, like, I've always gravitated towards the Battlemaster in that the sense of, like, this almost feels like having cantrips and having that many different options to flavor what you are doing, and having that ability with the weapons is giving that to basically all of these classes, which is fantastic.
And the difference, too, between Weapon Mastery and the Battlemaster's maneuvers is weapon mastery is always on the
Yeah.
weapons in which you unlock it, because you don't get it unlocked on all weapons at once. It's always just a subset of weapons. But once you've unlocked it on those weapons,
That's it.
you get to use it over and over and over again.
Right. So that brings us to the champion.
Yes. So the champion, that is always meant to be the simplest subclass in the game. Our aim is for this to be super beginner friendly. And also, I often think of the champion because I have fun playing the champion. The champion is what I've been playing in our playtest. It's also a great choice for the veteran player who kind of wants to take a break and just have some fun, fight monsters, and have pretty straightforward but satisfying features. And so with that in mind, the champion continues to have their improved critical, but the champion also has gotten a couple of brand new features. So the remarkable athlete feature that champions had before has consistently been low rated. We looked at improving it, but instead we decided to replace it with two features. So the champion gets a new feature called Adaptable Victor, because champions are always winning, and they are the champions. And we realized the champion needed something that allowed them more flexibility and some chances to shine outside combat. And so Adaptable Victor gives the champion the ability to change around actually skill proficiencies. And that will allow them to have the kind of adaptability that you would associate with someone who's all about winning. And similarly, at 6th level, there is a new feature called Heroic Warrior that allows the champion to give themselves in combat heroic advantage if they don't have it. Part of this is, again, to just give them something simple that gives them a little boost, and like suddenly, okay, I now have advantage on this attack roll. But it's also a way for them to have more of a chance of triggering their improved criticals. So we wanted there to be a bit more of a chance for the champion to be critting, since that is one of their core capabilities. We also have improved their survivor feature because in revisiting it, we thought it was actually a little funny that a feature that's all about the champion being hard to kill gave them no advantage on death saving throws. So we have now added that champions also have advantage once they get survivor on death saving throws. And riffing on their improved critical feature, we've made it so that a champion, when they're making death saving throws, if they roll an 18, 19, or 20, they get the effect of rolling a 20 on a death saving throw. Nice. So essentially, they have improved critical now on death saving throws as well. So it's going to be easier for them than pretty much anyone else in the game to just hop back up and continue fighting.
Perfect. So kill them with fire. Noted. That's fantastic. And now we have our barbarian friends.
Yes. So the barbarian, in addition to getting weapon mastery at 1st level, has some really significant quality of life improvements. One of the main ones, if not the main one, is the barbarian can now keep their rage going simply by spending a bonus action. Because we've seen, not only in our own play of the barbarian, watching other people's play, also reading playtest feedback, that one of the biggest concerns for barbarian players is it being too easy for their rage to get shut off. Right. Any of us who've played barbarians, we've had that experience where we turn it on and then suddenly like, oh my goodness, wait, I don't have someone to attack.
Yeah.
I took no damage. Oh, my rage just turned off. And,
right.
And rage is such a critical part of the class's kit. And so we wanted the barbarian who can turn rage on with a bonus action to be able to keep it going by spending a bonus action. Now, you still have other ways of keeping it going because you're sometimes going to want to use your bonus action for something else, and you still can. So you can still keep your rage going by making an attack roll against an enemy. We've also now added that if you force an enemy to make a saving throw, that also keeps your rage going. Now, we've emphasized now the Barbarian keeping their own rage going, and so we no longer have the I take damage and it keeps going.
Yeah.
We really want the focus to be on, this is under the Barbarian's control.
Right.
Other people are not keeping their rage going.
Yeah.
They are. You're now going to be able to do that far easier than you ever could before. Your rage also lasts longer. Now lasts up to 10 minutes, meaning in some dungeon environments, a single rage could potentially extend into more than one combat.
Perfect.
So, again, huge quality of life improvement there. Other than that, we have combined some things. Danger Sense and Feral Instinct have merged into a single feature. We have moved Brutal Critical to a higher level, but made it more powerful and made it scale more directly with your level. A lot of nice things here that are, again, about just making it, like getting as many things out of the way as possible of the Barbarian being this just amazing warrior fueled by their rage.
Perfect. The subclass for the Barbarian that we were showing off is the Berserker.
Yes. And talk about quality of life improvements. The biggest pain point in the Berserker for years has been, unfortunately, the Berserker's signature feature, Frenzy.
Yeah.
Because, as anyone who knows who's read the Berserker or played it, Frenzy had the painful trade-off that if you used it, you gained a level of exhaustion. And that felt painful enough that for many people it made it undesirable to even use the feature, which is a major issue because that's the signature feature of the subclass. So the main thing we have done in the Berserker is completely redesigned Frenzy. So now Frenzy does not charge you basically exhaustion to use it. Instead, the Berserker, while you have Reckless Attack going, which is the core Barbarian feature of I attack recklessly, I give myself advantage on my attack rolls, but other people have advantage on their attack rolls against me. As long as I'm reckless attacking, the first target you hit on each of your turns is going to take extra damage. And you get to roll a number of d6s equal to your rage damage bonus and just throw that onto the damage pile. So now Frenzy is just all about, if I'm reckless attacking, which is all in theme for the Berserker, once per turn, there's going to be this burst of extra damage.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun in our playtesting, and again, removed that very painful cost that Frenzy used to have.
There's almost like a theme of like the burstiness and more random occurrence happening.
For some classes.
Yeah.
So one of the things we're always looking at is where do we want more burstiness, which is characteristic of like the new Frenzy, some of the new Sorcerer features, the Rogue Sneak Attack, versus where do we want more predictability and planning. And when we make that decision, it's all about the identity of the class or subclass and all about its theme. So some, it's on theme, like in the Wizard, to be all about planning and predictability. But then other classes, or subclasses, where often the theme and the play style that people are looking for is a more sort of gonzo unpredictability, that's where we then incorporate more burstiness.
There is also, I believe, a spell the Sorcerer has now that they can actually get hit points back.
Yes, yeah, the Sorcerer's Vitality feature, which gives them a spell of the same name, allows the Sorcerer to channel their innate magic to restore themselves.
Yeah, I very much appreciate that because you always think of somehow sorcerers in my head, because you associate them sometimes like with a dragon or some other very monumental primal force, the idea that they can like heal themselves and be a little bit tougher than maybe their counterparts, a right good fit.
And they got that little boost of survivability, and so do warlocks. Something that we didn't talk about earlier when we talked about warlocks is in this playtest, all warlocks now get training with medium armor.
Yeah.
And we did that because many warlocks end up being melee focused or sort of hybrid. They spend part of the time at range, part of the time in melee.
Yeah.
And because warlocks actually occupy a design space akin to the paladin and the ranger of kind of a hybrid character, we wanted to give them a little more resilience. And this will be particularly helpful for any warlocks who choose Pact of the Blade, so that they are not quite as squishy when they go into melee.
I always want more stuff for my warlocks. So a little bit more armor doesn't hurt. That's fantastic.
Now, this UA, in addition to all of the new spells that we've mentioned that are offered by various class features, also has tweaked versions of several spells like Hex, Eldritch Blast, but there are also a handful of new feats here. We continue our series of presenting new epic boons.
Right.
I feel like with each UA, they get more and more epic, because again, that's the feedback we're getting is people are like, we like this, but please
do more.
Turn up the volume on how epic it is. And then also there is the Weapon Master feat that I mentioned for people to try out weapon mastery, even if they are not a member of one of the warrior classes.
Boy, if only this UA had more stuff.
It's so much stuff.
It is a weighty UA, but
Yes.
It's fantastic. There's a lot to delve into. So, as always, feedback is important.
Feedback is critical to this entire process. We are here with this material because of the feedback we've been receiving for years. Weapon Mastery grew out of the feedback we've been receiving for years about give us more tactical options if we're a weapon-focused character. And it is a prime example of how the ongoing conversation that we've been having for the life of 5th edition is feeding these various experiments and then will fuel where we end up in the 2024 version of the Player's Handbook. We will, once we wrap up the Player's Handbook playtesting later this year, we'll also then move into Dungeon Master's Guide playtesting, Monster Manual playtesting. So lots of exciting stuff ahead.
A lot of videos to make.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I guess that's it. We covered everything. Somehow we did it.
We did, although this UA is so big that there are many important details that
you need to read it.
Yeah, people will see, they're going to see the new version of Twin Spell in here, new versions of various Eldritch Invocations. There are all sorts of gems to go find in the mine that is this Unearthed Arcana.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for talking about Unearthed Arcana yet again, and thank you everyone who watched this probably very long video, including everyone who has had to watch it at 2 times speed. It's a lot of content to get through, but we appreciate you. So thank you so much for watching.